She brought the IRS documents. He had no answer. What happened when a congresswoman exposed the Chief Justice's hidden financial ties? Live on camera. This isn't just a legal battle. It's a raw, unfiltered look at power, privilege, and the truth they desperately tried to bury. If you're tired of the elite playing by different rules, hit that like button, subscribe, and let's expose this together. Long before she ever stepped into the polished halls of Congress, Jasmine Crockett knew the raw, unvarnished truth of the American justice system. Her journey began not in Ivy League lecture halls, but in the dusty, politically charged air of Texarkana, Texas. Her mother, a nurse, worked grueling double shifts while her father ran a humble repair shop. There were no shortcuts, no inherited legacies, just the relentless grind of everyday life. Crockett's path to law was a maze of obstacles. She fought for a scholarship to Rhodes College, almost losing it because a single page was missing from her application. A stark reminder that one small oversight could erase a lifetime of dreams. This early lesson in systemic fragility fueled her. After college, she packed her life into a battered Honda Accord and drove to Houston, enrolling in Thurgood Marshall School of Law. It wasn't a glamorous institution. The vending machines broke more often than they worked, and the lecture halls lacked the scent of polished wood. But it was there that she learned survival, not just legal theory. She wasn't seeking wealth or prestige. She sought to understand the very system that had caged so many people she knew, people from her own community. Upon graduation, while her peers chased lucrative corporate law gigs, Crockett chose a different path. She became a public defender in Jackson, Mississippi. The first year nearly broke her. She worked from a shared office with a perpetually broken AC, and court clerks, with casual disdain, called her sweetheart or girl, regardless of her legal victories. Yet she stayed. She stayed because she knew that without her, these defendants, often voiceless and forgotten, would have no one. She saw judges roll their eyes at young black men in the courtroom, and each time she left the courthouse, she felt the fight wasn't over, merely paused. After 5 grueling years, she returned to Texas, opening a small civil rights practice in Dallas, taking on cases no one else dared touch. Unlawful stops, wrongful evictions, police intimidation. Some weeks, she barely kept the lights on, but word spread. Clients came not for flashy billboards, but because she listened, remembered their names, and stood with them, not just for them. Her leap into politics wasn't a childhood dream. It was a response to seeing a local councilman laugh at residents complaining about lead pipes. She realized that to change the rules, she had to be in the room where they were made. She ran for state office, then for Congress, winning both times, a testament to her unyielding spirit. And now she sat across from Chief Justice John Roberts, a man who had never known what it felt like to beg a judge for a stay of sentencing at 4:45 p.m. on a Friday. Chief Justice John Roberts Jr. embodied a different kind of power, one inherited, coded into the very tone of his voice and the weight of his pauses. Born into comfort, his family's ascent through the executive ranks of Bethlehem Steel ensured a stable, privileged upbringing. He attended La Lumiere School, a private boarding institution whose tuition alone exceeded the annual income of most American families. This was a pipeline to power, feeding students directly into the Ivy League. Roberts, a Harvard man twice over, was the institution's darling. Smart, polished, ambitious. He moved through the legal world with the confidence of someone who had never truly been told no. He clerked for a future Chief Justice, served in the Reagan administration, and by his 40s, had argued dozens of cases before the Supreme Court, always the youngest, always the most prepared. His friends called him brilliant, his critics slippery, but all agreed he knew how to win. His nomination to the Supreme Court in 2005 was met with bipartisan support. He projected an image of calm, reason, and fairness, famously describing himself as an umpire, calling balls and strikes. Yet over the years, that image began to fray. Critics pointed to opinions that weakened voting rights, decisions favoring corporations, and dissents against expanding protections for workers. To some, it seemed he wasn't just calling the game. He was protecting the team in the better uniforms. Still, he maintained his composed demeanor. Roberts didn't yell, didn't throw punches, didn't engage in Twitter smears. He quoted legal texts, smiled politely, and moved through marble hallways with an air of untouchable confidence. But what men like him often fail to grasp is that silence doesn't always equate to fairness, and distance doesn't guarantee objectivity. When your entire life is spent in rooms where your presence is expected, it's easy to mistake comfort for balance. So when Jasmine Crockett challenged him, not with insults but with unyielding facts, it struck a nerve he may not have even known he possessed. Here was a woman who neither sought acceptance nor groveled for legitimacy, speaking without the deference he was accustomed to from those outside his social tier. To Roberts, this felt less like an ethical challenge and more like an assault on the very world that had shaped him. A world of mahogany tables, polished floors, and tenured friends who rarely questioned each other in public. Perhaps he believed a carefully phrased remark, a subtle dig at Crockett's courtroom experience, would remind her of her place. Whether intentional or strategic, it backfired spectacularly. Crockett had spent her entire career being underestimated, and she was done asking for space. But the true eruption was yet to come. The room remained thick with unspoken tension, even after Jasmine Crockett laid bare her street-level legal experience. No one knew what would happen next. Hearings are usually predictable pageantry, but this was different. Something raw and heavy had entered the room. Roberts glanced at the committee chair, hoping for an intervention. But Congressman Avery Dalton of Nebraska merely pursed his lips, refusing to engage. Crockett leaned forward, her fingers laced calmly on the table. "Chief Justice," she began, her voice steady, "do you know what it's like to ask a judge to grant bond to a mother of two who stole diapers because her WIC benefits didn't come through on time?" She didn't wait for a reply. "Or to represent a 19-year-old who took a plea deal after spending 3 months in county because he couldn't post 500? He was innocent, but jail does things to a person's mind." Roberts adjusted his glasses but remained silent, every subtle movement captured by the rolling cameras. Jasmine continued, her voice gaining a quiet intensity. "I defended a woman whose trial transcripts were missing entire pages. She was sentenced to 12 years. Do you know how hard it is to appeal a conviction with no record of the closing arguments?" The weight in her tone was not performance, it was memory. An aide handed her a slim manila folder. Without looking down, she opened it and slid a page forward. "I'd like to enter into the Record Exhibit C, a report outlining these cases. These are names, Chief Justice. Real people, not law school hypotheticals." She paused, her gaze fixed on Roberts. "I know you prefer hypotheticals." That stung. A few committee members shifted uncomfortably. Roberts looked at the document, but didn't touch it. He cleared his throat. "With respect, Congresswoman, this hearing is meant to evaluate judicial conduct, not individual casework." "Oh, I agree," she interrupted, not harshly, but with a firmness that silenced him. "That's why I think it's relevant to compare how we define conduct. Because if mine is constantly questioned, despite actual courtroom work, and yours isn't, despite financial conflicts we're about to discuss, then I think we're looking at two different standards." For the first time that morning, Roberts met her gaze, their eyes locked. In that brief stillness, the room recognized the true nature of the clash. Not just law, but class, proximity to pain, and the invisible hierarchies rarely spoken of. Roberts blinked slowly. "I would ask that the Congresswoman refrain from implying misconduct without evidence." "You'll get evidence in a moment," she replied, reaching for a second, thicker folder. Her aide looked uneasy. Everyone else was riveted. Crockett let the anticipation build. "This is a review of past rulings authored by you," she stated, her voice calm. "Cases where the decision closely aligned with the interests of the Judicial Policy Center, a group that until recently failed to disclose donations made to a think tank that your wife sat on the board of. That same group filed amicus briefs in 3 of the 5 decisions we're discussing." She handed the folder to the clerk. A 4-second silence stretched, then soft murmurs rose from the side. Roberts's jaw tightened. "I have no knowledge of those donations, and I would caution against public speculation without—" "I'm not speculating," Crockett interjected. "I'm reading from filings submitted to the IRS. They're dated. They're signed. They've been public for weeks, just not talked about." Boom. No yelling, no insult, just a precise, surgical accusation, laid out like a perfectly aimed trap. The oxygen shifted. Staffers checked phones. A journalist scribbled furiously. No one watched the chair anymore. All eyes were on her. Crockett leaned back. I'm not here to play the headlines. I'm here to remind this country that prestige doesn't erase accountability. The shock wave wasn't just her words, but the calm, unflinching way she delivered them. She didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice, didn't seek approval. She spoke like someone who had waited long enough for the microphone to come to her. The Judicial Policy Center, she continued, flipping to the next page, her voice cutting through the stunned silence, has funneled over $3.2 million into organizations with documented influence on federal rulings. Most people don't track that kind of money, but that's the thing about power. It hides in plain sight. The room was dead still, save for a faint cough and the subtle hum of air conditioning, now suddenly noticeable. Robert stared at her, his smirk gone. I find it deeply troubling, Crockett added, that one of the largest donations was made during the exact quarter your opinion in the Vanguard Medical versus Reeves case was drafted. The outcome of that decision, a 5-4 ruling, directly benefited the policy group's top donors. The murmurs returned, louder this time. Someone dropped a pen. Is she serious? A whisper cut through the air. Fingers flew across keyboards, drafting tweets before the next sentence could leave her mouth. Jasmine flipped another page. I'm not accusing you of writing decisions for money. I'm accusing the system of allowing the illusion of neutrality to stand unchallenged for far too long. When ordinary people get audited over $600 in Cash App transactions, but federal justices don't have to disclose gifts from political megadonors, something's off, and the public knows it. This wasn't a direct hit on Roberts, but on the entire edifice he represented. The structure, the glass walls, the weightless air in rooms where decisions are made without consequence. Roberts straightened in his chair, his expression blank, but anyone who had argued a case before him recognized the controlled response of a man walking a mental tightrope. I was unaware of any overlap between my decisions and those donations, he said slowly, and I reject the suggestion that my judgment is for sale. Jasmine nodded once, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement, as if clocking a predicted response. Then let's get everything on the record, she said. Let's subpoena financial disclosures for all 9 justices. Let's see where else the money is touched. Senator Orrin Veal, a senior Republican, raised his hand slightly. Congresswoman, let's not... Senator, she interrupted, without turning her head, I've seen how fast this body moves when it's convenient, and I've seen how slow it gets when the pressure is uncomfortable. I didn't come here to make people comfortable. Veal lowered his hand. For a full 15 seconds, no one spoke. It was the kind of silence that felt less like peace and more like the edge of something coming loose. The chair finally broke it. Let the record reflect the evidence submitted by Congresswoman Crockett. We'll recess for 10 minutes before continuing. Cameras kept rolling. People slowly rose, some walking out into the hallway looking dazed, others whispering across rows of chairs. A few exchanged glances that said, this just turned into something much bigger than anyone expected. Outside, news trucks repositioned. One crew from Pittsburgh, there for stock shots, now live streaming. Crockett remained seated, calm, steady. Her aide leaned in, whispering. She shook her head. Not yet. She knew the blowback was coming. The headlines, the calls, maybe even the threats. But she also knew this was bigger than her. It had been for a long time. Every time a decision hurt people without power and no one was held accountable, the weight accumulated. All she'd done was tear back one corner of the curtain, but a storm was already forming outside these walls. When the 10-minute recess ended, the building felt different. The rotunda outside the hearing room swarmed with reporters, interns, and policy analysts, all refreshing Twitter. Did you hear what she said about the Vanguard case? Someone whispered. Inside, the tone had shifted. Not tense, not explosive, but quieter, as if everyone knew they were part of something they didn't entirely understand and couldn't control. Jasmine Crockett sat composed, waiting, knowing this was just the pressure drop before the storm. Across from her, Chief Justice Roberts, his hands neatly folded, was acutely aware that every twitch of his eyebrow could become a meme. What the cameras didn't show was the hallway conversation during the break. Two senior Democratic aides pulled Crockett aside. One, a wiry man, leaned in, his glasses fogging. "You sure you want to go this route? Once this gets out, it's not just about you and Roberts." She didn't blink. That was the point. The other aide, a Latina in her 50s, tried a softer angle. "Look, Jasmine, we've got judges up for confirmation next month. You stir the pot too hard, you lose leverage." Jasmine's voice remained even. "If leverage means protecting a broken system, they can keep it." The aides exchanged glances and walked away. She understood the backroom etiquette, the calls to donors before going public. She just didn't care anymore. Meanwhile, Republican staffers huddled, whispering. A young, khaki-suited aide muttered, "She just accused the Chief Justice of selling influence." The older one shook his head. "No, she didn't. She just laid the receipts down and let us connect the dots. That's the problem." Back in the room, committee members tried to steer the hearing back to center, asking Roberts softball questions about impartiality. His polished words about ethics and public trust fell flat. No one had forgotten Crockett's bombshell. Jasmine remained silent for the rest of the hearing, but every camera still panned her way. Every journalist scribbled her name. As she quietly gathered her things, holding onto the folders herself, a reporter asked for a comment. "The work speaks louder than the headlines," she said, just loud enough for the mics to catch. In the basement parking lot, her aide asked, "You really think this is going to change anything?" She paused, opening the SUV door. "I think it's already started." Outside those stone walls, America was waking up to a very different conversation. By sunset, the clip had racked up over 3 million views, not just on political news sites, but everywhere. Group chats, Facebook, TikTok. Jasmine Crockett versus Chief Justice John Roberts became a litmus test. In an Akron barbershop, a young barber, Dion, declared, "That woman didn't blink. She said what everybody else is too scared to say." An older man, Calvin, raised an eyebrow. "But what does it change? You think Roberts is going to lose sleep? These people protect each other." In a community center, Tasha stared in disbelief. "She really brought the IRS filings on camera?" "I didn't even know you could do that in a hearing," Reggie added. "That's not just guts, that's precision." Not everyone applauded. Cable news panels debated Crockett's appropriate tone, replaying the clip 5 times, focusing on her phrasing over her evidence. "She implied the Chief Justice is corrupt," a former judge stated. "She didn't imply it," a younger commentator retorted. "She showed the paperwork." That's not shade, that's documentation. In church parking lots, university lounges, and donut shops, people talked, whispered, argued. Think pieces bloomed. Some praised her for breaking political niceties. Others condemned her for a partisan spectacle. But beneath the noise, something deeper stirred. Michaela, a 16-year-old in Tulsa, watched the clip 3 times. Is that what being a lawyer is actually like?" she asked her mom. Her mom smiled, eyes on the screen. "That's what being brave looks like." Crockett's congressional office was flooded with over 9,000 emails in 48 hours. Half support, half accusations of disrespect. But the ones that resonated were different. A handwritten letter from a retired court clerk, a voicemail from a public defender who cried in her car, a message from a mother whose son, now studying law, said, "She looks like us. Thank you for reminding him why he started." Inside Capitol Hill, some Democratic colleagues avoided her, one sending a cautious text, "Bold move today. Hope you're ready for the fallout." But Congressman Drew Mallory from Michigan walked into her office unannounced. "You did something most of us never do," he said. "You told the truth, no matter what it costs." She looked up from her laptop. "I didn't do it to be brave." "I know," he replied. "That's why it was." While the public took sides, Roberts prepared his next move. 3 days later, the Supreme Court released a rare, carefully worded public statement. It didn't name Crockett or address the Judicial Policy Center allegations directly, but its message was clear. The integrity of the court and its justices must be preserved through thoughtful discourse, not targeted political provocation. In other words, we're not talking about it, and how dare you ask? News outlets scrambled, pundits dissected it. "A clear rebuke," one commentator claimed. A public relations dodge, scoffed another. Roberts held no press conference, gave no interviews, but the message was received in legal circles. He was drawing the line. That same afternoon, a leaked story, anonymously sourced, claimed Roberts was deeply disturbed by the personalized nature of the accusations. Crockett remained silent, amplifying the tension. The court statement tried to shift focus, but the public wasn't moving on. Law students analyzed her exhibits. A subreddit on judicial financial ties emerged. Journalists dug through unnoticed tax records. It wasn't just about Roberts anymore. It was about the rules, or lack thereof, for the highest court. Crockett's office became a war room, staff fielding calls, redirecting press, monitoring social media for threats. The mood was focused, not frantic. An intern quietly printed every article, compiling them into a binder. If they're going to rewrite history, she shrugged, we should have a copy of the first draft. That night, Jasmine stood by her office window, looking at the Capitol steps. She hadn't planned any of this. The remarks, the files, yes, but not the wave that followed. She didn't want to be a symbol, just for the system to stop pretending accountability was an attack. Her chief of staff knocked. You should see this, he said, holding a tablet. Justice Roberts faces renewed scrutiny over undisclosed ties. Senators call for expanded judicial ethics code. Not a victory, but not silence. She handed it back. Down the hall, her team debated a follow-up statement. Let them keep scrambling, one aide said. Don't feed it, another offered. Or say nothing and let the public keep asking the questions. That's what scares them the most, when people don't let it go. She didn't decide that night. Instead, she reread the court statement, focusing not on the tone, but on the fear behind it, the carefully chosen words of a man who thought he couldn't be touched, suddenly realizing someone had the nerve to touch back. This was no longer just a clash between two names. It had grown into something harder to control, harder to ignore. 2 weeks later, the noise hadn't died down. Headlines shifted, but the conversation sparked by Crockett's confrontation moved like an undercurrent. In coffee shop murmurs, editorial letters, law school whispers. What does it mean when the highest court has no real watchdog? In Columbus, Ohio, a young mother asked her congressman, why are Supreme Court justices allowed to keep secrets? He gave the usual answer, but no one clapped. In Stockton, California, 2 paralegals compared notes on Crockett's exhibits. It's wild how fast they tried to make this go away, Teresa said. If she'd lied, they'd have dragged her across the floor. But she didn't, so they ignored her instead. Crockett hadn't exaggerated, blustered, or stormed out. She brought facts, names, numbers, timelines. She did what people say they want their leaders to do, speak with substance. Yet the power structure closed its mouth, looking away. It wasn't about decorum or even her. It was about who's allowed to ask certain questions without being labeled disrespectful. Who can say, this doesn't feel fair, and be taken seriously? Who gets to walk through the front door without being asked how they got in? Jasmine Crockett was never supposed to sit in that seat with such certainty, not because she wasn't qualified, but because her presence alone shattered the illusion. She didn't owe her power to pedigree or lean on legacy. She wasn't asking for access. She was already in the room, flipping the script without permission. For people like her, there's always a risk. When someone like Jasmine speaks plainly about the distance between privilege and pain, the system calls it aggressive. When she brings documentation, it's combative. When she asks real questions, it's inflammatory. But it's none of those things. It's just uncomfortable. And that discomfort reveals a deeper truth. Some institutions aren't used to being challenged by voices outside the inner circle, especially not voices carrying both personal experience and professional credibility. A law professor at Tulane put it simply, Crockett didn't accuse Roberts of corruption. She accused the system of letting proximity to power go unchecked. And the silence that followed said more than any rebuttal could. In D.C., the debate continued quietly. Some lawmakers pushed for a modest judicial ethics bill. Others tried to bury it. Crockett didn't press publicly. She knew when to speak and when to let silence do the work. She wasn't trying to go viral. The goal was always to make it harder for people to pretend they didn't know. Her constituents noticed. In Dallas, an older man approached her at a block event. He didn't ask for a photo or say much, just leaned in and said, "They heard you. Doesn't matter if they admit it." That was enough. The real win wasn't headlines or hashtags, it was widening the lens, forcing a moment where a person without the usual pedigree stood unflinching before power. But Crockett still had one thing left to say, choosing her moment carefully. No press conference, no podium, no flag backdrop, no reporters. Just Jasmine Crockett at her desk in her district office, wearing a navy blue blouse, her hair in a loose ponytail, staring directly into her laptop's lens. The live stream started quietly on a Tuesday evening, a notification for subscribers. "Hey," she said simply, "I know it's been a minute." Tens of thousands tuned in. She didn't talk about Roberts or name names. Instead, she told a story from years earlier, fresh out of law school, representing a teenager in a stolen vehicle case. He was 17, never arrested. The car was his cousin's, but no one believed him. Crockett spent the weekend chasing paperwork, proving the car was borrowed, not stolen. Charges dropped. "I remember the judge looking at me like I was wasting everyone's time," she said, her voice quiet. "Like defending this boy's freedom was an inconvenience." She paused, then looked back at the camera. "Sometimes the fight isn't about the facts. It's about whether the people in power think you deserve to ask the question in the first place." That was the thread connecting everything. The teenager, the courtroom, the congressional hearing, the silence that followed. She didn't frame herself as a hero or declare victory. What she did was harder. She held the mirror. "This system wasn't built with everyone in mind," she said. "We know that. What matters is what we do when we see it in real time. When we're in the room and the double standards show their face, do we stay quiet to protect our seat, or do we say something and risk losing it?" The comment section flooded. "Say it louder. We got your back. Keep pushing." She scrolled once but didn't linger. She wasn't there to perform. She was there to remind people that truth doesn't need a permission slip. "They'll call it disrespectful," she said, her voice steady. "They'll say it breaks tradition. But I didn't get into this line of work to fit a mold. I got here to break the silence that's been choking people for decades." Her eyes didn't waver. "We can have power and still forget the people who sent us here. Or we can make it mean something. We can pull the curtain back and stay standing." She sat in silence for a moment, letting it hang, then smiled slightly. "Anyway, that's all I've got tonight. If you're still watching, thank you. Keep asking questions. Keep paying attention. Don't let anyone make you feel small for giving a damn." With that, she ended the stream. No slogans, no orchestration. Just a woman telling the truth, plainly and without apology. That clip would be shown in classrooms, quoted in campaign speeches. Some would twist it, some would honor it. But Crockett didn't need it to go viral. She needed it to be real. Because power, once questioned, can never fully go back to sleep. Not when people has seen how easily it shatters under truth. Before I tell you the rest of this story, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and share it so everyone knows the truth about Chief Justice John Roberts. If this story moved you, if you believe transparency, accountability, and fairness aren't too much to ask from the people in charge, share this video. Talk about it. Send it to someone who still thinks the system always works the way it should. And most of all, remember, you don't need permission to demand better. If you want to be part of those who don't bow their heads and join the fight, then like, subscribe, and share.